Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I'm your host. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Matt Freeman.
I'm excited to talk to you about this film.
You were supposed to say, call me Matt Gucci.
Call me Matt Gucci. See, I need to do a worse Italian accent, though.
I think mine was pretty bad.
Yeah, no, yours was perfect, actually. Yours was spot on.
This week on the show, our series Deconstructing the Films of Sir Ridley Scott finally concludes with the director's 27th feature film. This week we're talking about 2021's House of Gucci. And that's all we're doing today, folks. We are talking about House of Gucci, and then we are going to wrap up our Ridley Scott series. We got to talk about, oh God, what we learned, if anything, and then we'll try to. We're not going to rank all 27 movies. Normally, we rank the movies after we're done. We're not going to do that. We're going to separate them into tiers, and then we're going to talk about the 5 best. I think
Sounds good to me.
that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. Let's just get right into it, Matt, and talk all about House of Gucci.
It was a name that sounded so sweet, so seductive. Synonymous with worth, style, power. But that name was a curse too.
I've been a Gucci all my life.
Your name is in the history books.
Paolo, you are Gucci, you need to dress the part.
It's chic.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
Well, when Patrizia Reggiani, an outsider from humble beginnings, marries into the Gucci family, her unbridled ambition begins to unravel their legacy and triggers a reckless spiral of betrayal, decadence, revenge, and ultimately murder.
This movie was written by Becky Johnson, Roberto Bentevegna, and Sarah Gay Forden. It was, of course, directed by Sir Ridley Scott and stars Lady Gaga, Adam Driver, Al Pacino, and, of course, my main man, Jared Leto.
The inimitable Jared
doing
Leto.
just what he does.
Oh my God.
Matt, what did you think of House of Gucci?
You know, this was a really funny comedy. There were a lot of really good laughs in here. I mean, I thought Jared Leto in particular was really good in his comedic. Excuse me, I'm getting some notes from the producer. It's not. Oh my God. Okay,
I think it kind of is.
It kind of is.
It kind of is supposed to be a comedy.
But it's a bad comedy. It's not very funny. And too much of it is just straightforwardly dramatic for it to really be a comedy. Mm-hmm. But it has a lot of stuff in it that's undeniably comedic. I mean, I wasn't joking. Jared Leto's entire performance is a comic relief character.
It seems like a very specific, and I'm not an expert of Italian cinema, but it seems like a very specific kind of Italian, like over the top, kind of broad physical comedy cinema style. Leto specifically.
It seems there was something very high concept happening around this movie because you've got Lady Gaga and Jared Leto, who have both been in other movies. So I'm not saying they're like not actors, but they are also rock stars. And so the idea of having rock star, pop star, whatever you want to call it, you know, cultural icons in these roles as these figures in this, you know, morality play about this dynasty of excessively wealthy, you know, Italian people. It seems like they're going for some kind of, you know, operatic. I was gonna say elevated. That's like the exact wrong word. It's like they're trying to bring in like the lurid spectacle of having these pop icons be in this movie and bring like kind of the trashy tabloid nature of the story into focus, because it kind of is like so often they're showing like a newspaper, you know, or a you know, a photo in a magazine or something, and it's really emphasizing the degree to which this whole story is a kind of thing that you're consuming through your prurient weird interest in other people's lives, but then the movie itself is that in addition to commenting on it.
Yeah.
I may have just put more thought into the film than the creators did, but I'm not sure. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like this movie very much. I do think I think there are, if you can get past the accents, you might enjoy this movie.
Mhm.
I think people that like this movie are people that didn't care about the accents, because we joked obviously at the very beginning of the show about it. I think the Italian accents in this movie are passable to very bad.
Mhm.
And Al Pacino is like, doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Like, I'm Al Pacino, I'm gonna kind of sort of do it. Lady Gaga is trying her hardest, but it's just not good, and she also drops it several times throughout the movie. Like,
Mhm.
she'll just say some lines that just sounds like Lady Gaga talking. And look, I like Lady Gaga as an actress. I really enjoyed her in A Star Is Born. What would you say if I told you that a lot of people were mad that she was snubbed for an Oscar nomination for this role?
That would be extremely surprising to me, because
It's the truth.
I did not think she did a good job in this role. I honestly, it was a huge problem for me. I'm not really aiming to come out swinging, but like, so often in the movie, the problem is actually that you don't really know what she's thinking or feeling
Right.
in a situation where you're like, she's doing something and you're like, is this reaction, is this jealousy, does she feel snubbed? We were talking about this earlier. It's like, you can't actually tell, like, is she basically, a gold digger from the beginning, or does she actually fall in love with this guy? That's not a question that I should have coming away
Mhm.
from this movie. I mean, you could argue maybe there's room for ambiguity, right? But it's like,
Yeah.
I don't think there was meant to be. I think they meant to communicate that, and they just failed.
Yeah, I mean, I think, not to take the blame away from Ridley Scott, which I am very happy to do when it is deserved. I do think a lot of it falls on her shoulders and her inability to convey some of this stuff. I think the example I gave to you when we were talking about this before hitting record was the moment where she first meets Maurizio, where he says his name. He says Maurizio Gucci, and she has a reaction to that. She reacts, and I don't think she did a good enough job of communicating what that reaction is supposed to be. Is that supposed to be a like, oh my god, this is my ticket? Because obviously she has a lust for money and power, right? This
Mhm.
is unquestionably a core part of this woman's character, that she wants all of this. She wants power. She wants to be in charge. She wants to take all this, and when she sees it, she grabs it. Like, the first thing she does after she meets this guy is invite him to dance, and then stalks him to bump into him in a bookstore. Like, she wants this, but like, does she love him? And I don't know,
Mhm.
because I think like the scenes at the end where she like is meets him outside his house and is like stalking him and obsessed with him to the point where she eventually murders him. Is that because he's cut her off from her source of power? Is that because she wants to be, does she want to be his wife, or does she want to just be a Gucci? And
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I think, to directly address that, but kind of at a meta level, what is this story?
Hmm.
Well, like, you should be able to say in about a sentence, what is the story? Is this the story of a spurned wife? Is this the story of a social climber woman who got in over her head? Is this the story of the heir um of a fortune who was seduced and then tricked? Now, I'm not saying that a movie can only be about one thing. A movie can
Mhm.
be about all of these things, but there should be like a through line where it's like,
Yeah.
this is the point. This is the story we're telling. And I don't know um I don't know how to feel about anything that happened in the movie. It's left me with this feeling. It's almost the same feeling that I would have gotten if I had pieced together the story from tabloids.
Yeah.
Which again, I'm tempted, just for the sake of amusing myself, to like do the author's a genius, everything is intentional thing, and say, maybe we're meant to be left feeling like, I don't like these don't seem like real people. Their actions. What's funny is, despite the fact that this is a true story, none of these characters feel like real people.
It,
They're
yeah,
not
go ahead.
convincing to me. Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, none of them feel like real people. It doesn't feel like the real world. I think one of the really interesting things to me about this is I don't know a lot about Gucci brand as the brand. You know, I know what the brand, like the label looks like, and I know it's like high end, expensive clothing and accessories. Like I know that, but I don't know much about it beyond that. And I think this movie does like a really bad job of teaching you any of that. I feel like the movie is kind of designed with the understanding that you already know all this stuff, because like there's all these scenes where like people are continually telling Paolo, the Jared Leto character, that his designs are shit and awful, and the movie never like bothers to explain why that is. And I don't know a lot about fashion enough to know, like, yeah, I get it. Like, are they just being assholes, or was he really just a moron? And like, I think it's really weird how the show, like, I don't know anything about Gucci after watching this movie.
Yeah.
I know about these people and these crazy people, but like, I think it's weird that a movie about fashion icons seems so uninterested in fashion, because like we're introduced to Tom Ford at the end, which is a name I know, very, very, very famous designer. But again, the movie doesn't seem to care about like why what he created was important,
Yeah.
and why it was a good idea, and like none of these things hovering and around the characters and around what's happening, and you know, core to what the thing that everyone's fighting to hold on to is just a thing that the movie doesn't seem to care about very much, which I just thought was very strange.
Yeah, I agree. It's when you point it out like that, it seems really intentional, actually, that the movie about Gucci is so uninterested in the brand. It's really just about these weird people. I mean, if anything, the movie's focus follows the people's focus, and they're all like obsessed with like the idea of being a Gucci, which in their minds is sort of like, what's the name of that Italian family that was like the patron of like everybody in the 14th century or whatever? Doesn't matter. The point is, they see themselves as royalty, and like they're barely even aware that they're running a business. Like the funniest, not the funniest, but like one of the interesting parts to me was like Lady Gaga gets really mad when she learns that they're selling, basically Gucci is selling knockoffs of their own products.
Yeah.
And that this is apparently really profitable for them. And she's furious about this. And it's fascinating because you as the viewer, and I have, like you, no awareness of this brand or fashion or anything. I'm like, that sounds like a cool idea. If they can still turn a profit and they sell a lot more of those, it seems like they would make a lot of money. But she's like furious because it's like devaluing the brand. And it's like, but they're making like most of their money this way. Actually, this is clearly, it clashes with her image of what Gucci is supposed to be, and she like tries to destroy it. And it's so interesting because for somebody as obsessed with money as she is, it's almost like she's more obsessed with this image and the Gucci name.
Yeah, I think that is kind of what the climax of the conceit of the movie at the end, where she's about to be, you know, sentenced for her part in the murder, and the only thing she can say to the judge is call me Patrizia Gucci, because that's all she cares about. That's all she's ever cared about, is the name, is having this name, having the status symbol. So yeah, the money, I mean, she certainly enjoys the money. I think, you know, we critique Lady Gaga's performance, but I think one thing that is so good in this movie is the costuming and the outfits and the hair. Oh my God, it's so fucking 80s sometimes, the way she's dressed. It's remarkable and wonderful. And I think she looks the part very much. I think her performance is lacking. But I don't know. It's really like, I didn't hate this movie, right? I didn't like it, but I didn't hate it. But I was kind of fascinated by the ways in which it doesn't feel like a normal movie. Like, I think the perfect comparison point to me is All the Money in the World, which is a similar movie of, you know, very rich, very kind of idiosyncratic family, that has this weird crime happen in the middle of it. And they're very similar in that vein, but this movie could not be more different than that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that I was making that comparison as well while watching, because it's clearly Ridley, got interested in making these like true life, real thing that happened, but then he sort of distills it down to a morality tale. But then you kind of walk away from it thinking, well, what is the moral? Which is the same thing we said last time.
What is the moral?
Yeah.
What is the moral of this?
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, outside of rich it's bad. It's bad.
I guess
that's not even it though, because like, I mean, the movie obviously celebrates Tom Ford as being like a genius, and he's freaking loaded now. I don't know.
Because I don't think it's about them being rich. I think it's really about like the vanity and the image. I mean, so like it's more than a 3-beat. It happens like 6 times in the movie that somebody either calls her an outsider, or they say she's not a real Gucci.
Yeah.
Or they say like, your name isn't even Gucci, and she's like, actually it is. And it's like, it's this huge thing for her that she has a chip on her shoulder that like they're never going to accept her as a real Gucci, even though she married into the family. And so that's like, if there's a through line, actually, that's the through line, is she cares about that more than she cares about the money and the power. It's all this image.
But isn't it weird that is true, that people are constantly saying that to her, but like not consistently? I mean, it happens a lot, but also like Al Pacino is kind of sees her as the way to get to Maurizio, and so he's like buttering her up, so he's totally fine with her pretending she's a Gucci. Paolo is just kind of an idiot. Jeremy Irons' character, Maurizio's father, like doesn't like her at first, but they reconcile by the end, and that doesn't really matter or go anywhere. So I agree with you, like there's definitely this thing where she's the outcast, but that's not like the main focus of the movie. Like when I don't know, maybe I missed something, but I felt Driver's like sudden turnaround of, actually, I don't love you anymore. You fucked everything up for me. I'm done with you now. Felt very abrupt and sudden to me.
I kind of want to talk about Adam Driver, and by way of doing that, I kind of want to maybe slightly pull back my criticism of Lady Gaga's performance, because it's not that I thought it was just awful. It's that it is inadequate to the task of what the movie needs from her. She does great in a lot of places. I mean, the accent's pretty bad, but honestly, everybody's accent is bad.
Yes.
She's
Driver's
not the only one.
Bad too.
Driver's is bad, yeah. And so
did you know Chris Evans was considered for this role? Imagine Chris Evans doing an Italian accent. Oh my god.
But I thought, I mean, so here's what I'm gonna say is I'm not really gonna blame Lady Gaga that much, because I didn't think Adam Driver's performance, I thought it was it's so hard to say exactly, because it's not that it was a bad performance. It's just that I didn't know what the hell was going on with his character. And so is that the script's fault, or is that his fault?
Yeah, I mean, he's a better actor for sure. But I agree. I mean, like, obviously, like, if you look at it on paper, he is the guy who wanted nothing to do with any of this, and then was kind of conned into getting involved by his wife, and then kind of fell in love with the same things that at the beginning of the movie he professed that he despised and didn't want to be a part of. And so it's this kind of this fall into the lure of the extravagance of Gucci. Like I love that line where she says to him, I didn't know I married a monster. And he's like, you didn't, you married a Gucci. And it's like, oh, but you weren't that way at the beginning, buddy. Yeah. It's a great line.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like the way Driver played this character is he's so kind of standoff. Like, I think this is a movie trying to play in like larger than life archetypes. Like that's what Patricia is. That's what Paolo is. Even Al Pacino, like hiring Al Pacino to pay Aldo is like, just go big, because that's all elderly Pacino does now. Is he just goes incredibly big. And Driver, like, I think is, I guess, perhaps trying to be the straight man to all these big larger than life characters, because I feel like he plays Maurizio like very reserved. And like you're just kind of relying on the kind of Russell Crowe face ticks that we praised so heavily to really get into what he's thinking. And I don't think Driver is as good at that. Like the performances that I really love from Adam Driver are big, bombastic, kind of huge performances. And he doesn't really get to do that here. He's just kind of goofy and awkward, and like,
Yeah.
I like, why did he fall in love with all the stuff?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why did that happen? Like, is it just that's just what happens when you're tempted by this stuff? You eventually fall in love with the allure of it. Like when he gets the super expensive car, I literally said out loud to myself, why did he get that?
Yeah.
Why does he want that car?
Right. He just did, right? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's not dramatized. Like we're not told that part of the story. It's just this blank. And he does this thing in this movie where he has this like this weird smile that he
Mhm.
doesn't really do in any other movie. And it's sort of played in the beginning of the movie. It's sort of played as this like self-effacing, distancing, self-deprecating like expression. It's kind of an awkward expression that an awkward person would do to kind of cover for their discomfort,
Mhm.
and kind of just put on this smile when maybe they're uncomfortable. And it's fine. The problem is that he just kind of continues to use that expression like throughout the whole rest of the movie. And it's like, I don't like, is he, at the end when they're grilling him, when the investors are grilling him over like, why did you spend like millions and millions of dollars when like the company is in the red? And he has exactly the same expression on his face, and he's like,
Mhm.
I can explain all of this. And I'm like, this is the time for there to be like a crack in the facade, and for there to be some really nuanced, face acting, like you were saying, or just any convince me that this guy is not confident and calm in this moment, because he
Mhm.
shouldn't be. And it
Yeah.
was just weirdly monotone, actually.
The most he does is like has that one outbreak moment where he picks up the
The plate,
uh
yeah.
the plate and throws it down to the ground, but
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
Um
It's
yeah, I don't know. It's so fascinating because I agree with you. Like, I'm almost more interested in this part of the movie than the actual movie itself. Just be
Mhm.
like, what was going on in that head of yours, Adam, when you were making these performances? Like, what do
Yeah.
you think this character is? Like, why do you think he succumbed? Because I mean, in the early part of the movie, he just seems like a character who's completely content with allowing his wife to basically dictate the future of their lives. Like, I really, you're talking about the scene where she gets all outraged about the reproductions of the Gucci stuff, and he's like, the whole time he's like, oh, this is pretty clever actually,
Yeah.
and he's really into it. And then when they go and meet with his uncle, he's just like parroting the points that she made earlier when they were talking, and
Mhm.
so he's just like seems completely content with just kind of letting her dictate what they're doing and how they're going to do it, and who they're going to screw over, and how totally fine with it. And then it's like suddenly, he flees because of the whole crime they did with forging the signature, so he has to flee the country. And it's suddenly at that point a switch is flipped, and he's like, no, actually I've decided I don't like this anymore, and I don't like you anymore, and I'm actually going to blame you for all these problems, even though I went willingly along with all of it. It's all your fault. And I guess I just don't see why that happened internally in him,
Uh-huh.
like obviously he meets another girl and he likes her, so that's probably part of it. But like, I guess what I wanted to see was like internally, like, he says things like, you made me screw over my family, you made me screw everything up, you made me do all these things, but I didn't feel actual anguish from him at those moments.
Yeah, I
Like,
agree.
I wanted him, I guess, to actually feel bad about his uncle and his brother, and I don't think he does.
Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, you can follow it logically, in the sense
Mhm.
of you step back from it and you're like, yeah, I see why he'd be annoyed with her after she's like browbeaten him into this situation. But as
Yeah.
you say, we watched him do all these things and it didn't seem like he was bothered by it. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's I don't know if I want to blame. I don't know who to blame is the
Mhm.
interesting thing. And I mean, honestly, I think maybe the person to blame, appropriately enough, is the director. Because like this is one of those cases where I'm like, there is kind of a natural structure to this story
Yeah.
that it's just not being portrayed on the screen. And is that because like the actors aren't really being brought into the right frame of mind to say like, okay, we're going into this moment in the story. This is what your character is thinking and feeling. Was really important. I keep thinking this thought, and it's weird that I'm going to say it. Wouldn't it be interesting if Gore Verbinski had directed this movie? and the reason is I know exactly the reason. It's because you know that Gore Verbinski would have nailed exactly this thing that we're complaining about.
Yeah.
Where it's like the detail of, I need to understand why this person does this, and he's gonna construct every shot to communicate that to me, and we don't get any of that. We don't know any of the why.
This is so true. Like, I think the other thing I heard is that that Scorsese was considered for this movie as well. And I mean, it's very obvious to me that with these type of movies, that I don't know if he's even conscious that he's doing it, but that Ridley Scott is trying to kind of channel his version of Martin Scorsese films. And I just can't help but wonder how different and possibly better this movie would have been if Scorsese had done it. Because I don't think Ridley Scott excels at this kind of storytelling. I think all the movies that we think were either, mid-level or worse were this kind of, period piece crime story that takes place in roughly the 60s and 70s and 80s. Like we've done this exact kind of thing before. And it always kind of turns out this way. Like, I think American Gangster is in my opinion, the most successful of this type. But I think it's very weird to me that the murder that is at the climax of this film feels like such an afterthought of the script. Like, it just like, again, this is a story that I didn't know, right? I don't know anything about the Gucci as a company. I don't know anything about the Gucci's as a family. So I didn't know about this murder that this woman like paid people to murder her husband. And so this was a thing that really shocked me when we started going there, that we were doing this. And I just feel like if this is the thing that we've been building to the entire time, it should feel like more of like the thing that we've been building to the entire time. And it felt weirdly inert in that. Like the scene where she goes and meets the hitman for the first time, it plays that scene as just so mundane. I don't know. I don't even know if I have the words to describe it. It was so strange to me.
That scene felt like it was out of a different movie, in a way that felt intentional, because it's like this, everything's dirty. Everyone's dressed like,
she's dressed like super down. Like she's
everyone
not dressed like her usual self at all.
Everyone's like sweating and gross looking for some reason. I agree. And then the actual murder, it happens. It felt like it happened 5 minutes before the movie ended. It was just it was so quick. There was no proper denouement, or like, I mean, depends on what you think the movie's about, I guess. It just seemed to just slam shut at that point. And it didn't really feel, it left me feeling just nothing. Like, it's interesting because I kind of liked and cared about Adam Driver's character at the beginning of the movie, because he seems like this hapless sort of, befuddled, absent-minded professor type guy who's kind of lovable. And then you like him less and less as the movie goes on, as we get kind of some robot Ripley stuff where you just Ridley, and you just don't really understand why he's doing anything, and you become alienated from him, and then he's killed. And by the time he's killed, I was like, I should feel worse about this, because it is really sad that this guy got murdered in real life, but I don't really feel anything in context of this movie, which seems like a flaw to me.
Yeah, well, I think there's two reasons for that, and I think the driver side of it is absolutely there. Yeah, this idea that he how am I supposed to feel about him at the end of the movie? Am I supposed to like him? Am I supposed to not? He drove the company. Like, are we supposed to, when the group kind of turns against him and wants to buy him out of Gucci, are we supposed to be like, oh, this isn't fair? Or are we supposed to be like, you're getting what you deserve now? This is what you deserve. This is the thing you built for yourself. This is the way, the path you walked down, and this is what the end is for you. And I don't know. And maybe, like, maybe that is, we could do our thing and step back and say, all this is intentional. You're supposed to leave this movie going, I don't know how to feel about any of these people. Am I supposed to like them? Am I supposed to care about them? Is it good that he died? Is it bad? Is it like, is her story a tragedy of like this desire for power that eventually ends in destroying herself? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the closest. So what I'll say there, and again, I didn't feel any of this, but I was like watching the movie try to do this. Was, he realizes that he's been sort of taken out of Gucci, and then you see him kind of begin to become his old self. Like, he does the thing where he straps his pants legs, which is the thing he did at the beginning of the movie when he was just an innocent young man. So that he can ride his bicycle, and he gets on the bike, and he's riding the bike like he was at the beginning, and he's kind of smiling in a genuine way that we haven't seen for like 2 hours, and then he's like immediately murdered. And so it's like, that's the tragedy, is like, once he was out, he realized it was freeing, and then he's killed immediately for the mistakes that he made while he was kind of in the thrall of the Gucci lifestyle. That's what the movie's trying to do. By that point in the film, I was totally detached and bored.
Can I admit that I thought the part at the beginning when he was doing all that stuff was just them starting in media res with the day of his murder, and then we eventually build back to it? I didn't know that was 1978 version of him.
No, that's see, I didn't know the story of it. I didn't know he was murdered. I knew nothing walking into this, actually.
Neither did I. But I didn't know that that's what they were building up to. But I didn't realize until after the fact, when they played what I thought they played that scene again, that there was like, oh, so that stuff at the beginning was just like him on his last day, and then we show how we got here. But you could be right that it was just him, like, showing how he's kind of returned to his simpler life. The thing that gets with me, and maybe I missed a scene, Matt, but we do have this moment where they offer to buy him out. He doesn't say yes, does he? He just slams the beef down and walks out.
Yeah, the movie doesn't pretend that anybody is supposed to understand how finance works. So I think maybe it was just, they were just going to take him out, or like maybe they had actually loaned him the money in the first place, and so they were just like, you are no longer on this deal. I got the vibe that it was not an option, basically, and it doesn't particularly matter how that manifested.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Gucci goes public, right? And so, like, because in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, if he didn't sell before he was murdered, then wouldn't that 50% stake go to his daughter, of who his wife is now the primary caretaker? And I was like, is this what we're doing? And no, it's not. So I think you're right that the assumption that the thing that the movie is trying to communicate to you is that he was pressured into selling those shares, and he does it eventually and is out. And that's why Gucci goes public not long after that moment.
And I think maybe it was as simple as, they made that other dude the CEO, because I guess they were the board of the directors, that they have the
I mean,
control.
they could definitely fire him, right? But they can't force him to sell his share of the company or whatever.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know. You're absolutely right that the movie doesn't care about any of the details of any of that, because I don't know. The idea that, like, Adam Driver's character approaches this third party to try to attempt to buy out the shares from Al Pacino and Jared Leto's characters, and is there at the meeting, like, hiding in the, like, just off to the side, is the most fucking hilarious thing to be in the world.
Yeah.
Because, like, there's no way it went that way in real life, right? There's no way Maurizio Gucci, who is, like, funneling this deal to screw over his family members through a third party, is gonna just be, like, in the green room waiting to see if it goes down.
Yeah. It's interesting because I mean, I was thinking about, I admit maybe part of the reason the movie didn't work on me is that I just have trouble buying that, like, these people would care this much about their ownership of Gucci, where it's like they're gonna pay you a crap load of money
Yeah.
Like, and you're going to be fine. Go do something else. Or
I mean,
you're-
I guess that's true. I mean, but these people that were rich already, that were born rich and have been
Yeah.
rich their entire life. So the idea of saying, "Oh, $150 million is, to you and me," that's like immediately, yes, please
Right.
give me. But perhaps for these people, it's just not that kind of that alluring of a proposition for them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that was actually definitely the vibe. Was like, these people don't understand how to make money. They just have always been rich, and that's
Mhm.
why you see in the like uh, epilogue or whatever, like the everybody just died in obscurity because they
Yeah.
even
And
though they
no Gucci is involved with the company at all,
yeah
which is wild. Yeah, man. Um, I mean, speaking like, I still don't understand how any of the stuff works. I like it is. I think okay. One of the main problems for me, and I know we talked about many of the problems, but one of the main problems is I think this is very clearly, to me at least, for the first half of the movie, this is Lady Gaga's movie. This is a movie about Patrizia Reggiana and her involvement with the Gucci family and what
Mhm.
leads to her eventually hiring someone to murder and gets sentenced to prison, blah blah blah. We do this thing where once Adam Driver decides to divorce her, we cut away from her for a long time. And we
Mhm.
kind of follow Driver, and we follow Driver's dealings with Al Pacino and with Jared Leto and all that stuff we just talked about. And then we come back to her. I think when it really stood out to me was when he sends Domenico to serve the divorce papers to her. Basically, we just suddenly cut back to her, and like we haven't seen her in like 20 minutes. We don't even know what she's doing at this point. Like, what is her life now? Like, she's at her daughter's game, and like it just felt very weird to me. As like, this was her movie, and we just left her, and like we didn't really see how, like, what the separation was like on her. And I think part of that, to me, leads into my inability to buy her mental state that leads her to suddenly want to murder this guy, is because I don't think we saw the through line from of her deterioration through all this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're missing the dramatic scenes that we should have, and then we have like an hour of stuff that we don't need.
Yeah. And
Just
then we
overall,
jump back to dramatic scenes with her and Salma Hayek, like in a mud bath,
yeah,
debating what they need to do.
exactly. The movie's like 2 hours and 40 minutes. By the way, it's way too long.
Of course,
and then it's missing, like we just said. You need, like, that's the point. Is like, we need to understand. I think you kind of gestured at this a bit ago. Is she murdering him because she needs the money, or because she wants the money? Is it because she wants the glamour, and like she wants to be put back in the power seat of the Gucci organization, which then makes it delightfully ironic because he has been ousted,
Yeah.
and there is, and so making his murder pointless, if that were her goal, which would be, sort of horribly delightfully ironic if they had dramatized that in a way where it's like she kills him for the thing that has just been taken out of her grasp permanently anyway. But they didn't do that either. Is it revenge out of being jilted, or is it God? I mean, is it just does she just have a psychotic break and just think
has she just gone insane? Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're left, actually, is just like she's dot dot dot, and then she killed him because she was really really mad, which is not a reason. Like even in real life, if the story is just like, oh yeah, she just wanted his money, so she killed him, which is boring, but like at least that's a reason. Like,
right. And I mean, maybe the truth is that like no one fully understands why, like why, and it would be cool if the story like confronted that directly, that this woman, if you track through her life, she's like, this powerful force in the Gucci family, and is fostering deals, the woman behind the men, as it were, and then suddenly is ousted from it, and then just snaps and murders someone. You would like to see that the movie like really dive in and explore, what happened? Who was she? How could a person do that? And why? What could drive a person to make that choice, to do that thing? And I don't know, it just doesn't seem, again, it's this that moment, the murder, the crime seems so tacked on to the end of the movie to me, that it's like not about actually exploring or discovering, what type of person would do that. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question. I know who she is. Like I understand that she's this woman that wanted power, but you're absolutely right that there's no framing of the murder as another grab for power. If we had a scene where she like explained, and I don't maybe need it to be this direct or clear, but like the motive or her twisted, warped motive, at least, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, as we're talking, I'm kind of scanning her like Wikipedia page and realizing that like in real life she was a more interesting character than she was in this movie, which is not something that should ever happen.
No.
Apparently, her ex-husband was gonna get remarried, which would have cut her alimony in half, reducing her annual monetary assistance to $860,000 a year, which, according to her, amounted to a bowl of lentils. Isn't that great? Like she just sounds like a terrible, terrible person.
Mm-hmm.
And that could have been a fun sort of movie, or a at least it's something. we follow around this horrible sort of like Black Widow character. Oh, apparently the press called her Black Widow. And she's just awful, but it tries to like strike this middle road between her being awful and her being sympathetic, and it just fails.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point, because you're so right that like the movie wants you, because I do think there's scenes in the movie that she's like, oh, she's awful, that she's orchestrating this, she's pushing this. It's very clear that Adam Driver's character is not interested in being part of the family, not interested in going into the family business, doesn't care about any of that, thinks it's all ridiculous and absurd, and she is pushing him towards it. She is manipulating him towards it. She's doing things without his leave, that are going to strongly affect him in his life. And you're like, oh, that's kind of scummy. And the movie introduces this idea with Driver's father like calling her a gold digger, basically. And again, we have support in the movie for that, was she learned who this man was, she sought him out and put herself in his way. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on with that. But then again, it wants to be sympathetic to her. It wants to show like, oh, she actually got screwed over by this guy. She did all this stuff, to help him, to give him what she wanted, but ultimately what he embraced. And then he just said, thanks, fuck you. And like, you're God, which is it? Which is it? And
Yeah,
and if the answer is we don't know, then make that ambiguity like the central
I mean,
line of the film.
The thing where she wrote, the word that means paradise in her diary when he died, that's true. So like, I doubt that she was crying when she did that. I think she's just a bad person. It's so interesting that they tried to make her into this complicated, figure of sympathy. It's God, what a weird series of choices.
And again, like this is, I actually think like, this is a fascinating story. There's a story here and it's fascinating. And the idea that I can kind of understand why someone would say, we need to make a movie about this. Cause like the opulence, the decadence, the greed, and this crime, it's really, really fascinating.
Yeah.
But it just, it's so weird to me. And then we've been saying a lot of bad stuff. There's a whole sequence in which Jared Leto is opening his fashion line and gets raided by the police, and he's just hamming it up like crazy while his wife character is singing opera, and it's one of the most glorious things I've ever watched. It was so fucking funny. I was laughing my ass off.
Yeah,
like it's wild to me that that's in the same movie.
Weirdly enough, Jared Leto's performance like comes out the other side being my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, because
it's just funny. I mean, he gets such amazing lines that I almost wonder if they're like ad-libbed or something, because my favorite was they're arguing and he's like, and he says like very seriously, don't confuse shit for chocolate. They look the same, but they taste very different. trust me.
Trust me.
And you're like, that's hilarious. That's great. And he's constantly saying ridiculous things like this that really do seem ad-libbed in some places where
He's
you're
so
just
good.
like, what is that?
It's the
And
perfect bit of stunt casting that to me says we're in a different movie than the movie we end up being in.
Yeah.
Like he's so caked with prosthetics and stuff over his face and the balding hair. It's absurd. It's an absurd performance, and
Yeah.
nobody else is matching it. Nobody.
It really is. Yeah, you're totally right. It really is a bizarre injection of absurdism into a serious drama. Like the first scene that he shows up in, it's actually awkward because it's like this comedy character has stepped into our movie and the other characters like don't know how to react and they're like awkward, and because he's consistently a joke, and it's actually funny is the thing. It actually does work. But like you said a second ago, like I don't like loathe the movie, but it's very weird and it doesn't really come together.
No, yeah.
And but it's got a few things like that are fun and interesting and make you wonder, like, what exactly were they going for here?
It's one of those things like that that I wonder if Ridley Scott is making fun of Jared Leto by casting him in this movie and telling him, and like, you know, you do a take and everyone else is like, but then Ridley's like, yeah, no, perfect, Jared, exactly what I wanted from you. And it's like, is Jared Leto the Paolo of the acting world?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was seriously thinking that, like, why else do you hire two people who are sort of not known as primarily being actors for big roles, other than to say, like, the point of this is that it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
This is all kind of ridiculous, isn't it? You know, we're kind of laughing at / with the movie. I just, you know, it's interesting. I don't want to I don't want to just jump directly into the meta, like talking about Ridley Scott as a director conversation, but I feel like I'm being pulled into that segue because I'm just thinking about this movie. I'm thinking about all of the movies that we've talked about over the last 14 years of doing this project. And I'm like, I think he just has a certain sensibility of what a movie is supposed to be that just kind of doesn't match with mine / ours.
Sure.
Like he does, even movies of his that I love, like Gladiator. He has this approach toward filmmaking where it's very standing back from things and showing you and showing you the spectacle, showing you the kind of in Gladiator we've got the visual spectacle of the Colosseum, and he does this in almost all of his movies where it's very visual. And it ends up feeling detached because there's not an anchoring character who is rooting us in that moment. It's like the scenes are there for affectation. I mean, just I think for the sake of comparison, I'll bring up Verbinski again. It's unusual for Verbinski to have a shot that doesn't have a character in it. Usually the character is sort of anchoring the scene emotionally and narratively, and we're perceiving the scene via what is the character feeling about this situation. But Ridley will just show people, just show crowds, he'll show buildings, he'll show characters who are not at all main characters, just like doing things and having interactions. It's a whole different sensibility of how to approach storytelling and filmmaking, and it feels very, very different. And sometimes it works super well, like with Gladiator, and sometimes it's like a near miss, and sometimes it works terribly. And now that we've done all these movies, I feel like I can talk about that more. But I don't know. Do you feel what I'm saying at all?
I do. I think this is ultimately what we meant when we talked about Robot Ridley.
Mm-hmm.
I think we misplaced what was actually going on. Where at the beginning of this project, we'd kind of talked about the idea that he doesn't understand human emotion and doesn't depict it. And I don't think that's true. I think it's just he has this lens, this particular lens that is just less humanistic a little bit. Like it's just a little bit removed from the intimate human element. It's just, you're absolutely right. It's just backwards a little bit. In camera parlance, it's less close up and more wide shot.
Yeah.
That he is more interested in the world and the form of the movie from a wider lens than the intimate human drama that is happening. And it's not that the movies don't sometimes contain that intimate human drama. They do, just by kind of result of the script or the actors he was working with or the day-to-day decisions he made in those moments. But by and large, Robot Ridley to me now means he's just kind of 50 feet away, staring at humanity and going, huh, interesting. That's interesting. It's interesting that a woman would kill her husband for money, possibly. I don't know. It's interesting that the richest man in the world would refuse to pay the ransom if his grandson's kidnapped. It's interesting that these people all have vastly different stories about the same event. It's interesting, like, just yada 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 down the line.
Yeah.
And that makes for just a slightly colder movie.
Yeah.
I think.
I was going to say cold. I was going to say a bit of sterility and like almost clinical distance. I mean, like, here's the thing. Alien is a masterpiece, but Alien is a perfect example of this, where it's like we're some kind of, alien anthropologists, like watching these things unfold, even though, like, even when something incredibly dramatic and terrifying is happening on the screen, there's still this distancing. Like, I'm thinking about the scene when it's been too long, the character walks into the room with all the chains that are hanging, and how that scene is shot, and how it's this, it really focuses on the cavernousness of that room, and the, there's shots that are just like looking up. We don't have the character in the frame at all.
Yeah.
Or shots that are, like you were saying, the camera is pulled way back and we're seeing the character kind of in this, he's dwarfed by this space.
Yeah.
And we're, I think crucially, other details with that scene, we don't really see what he sees. He's looking at the alien, we're looking at him. So it's all kind of not the way that any other director would have done that sequence. And it's not like, this doesn't even amount to a criticism, because again, that's like a classic scene that is like taught literally.
Yeah.
But it's just, it ends up giving you this very particular feeling of coldness and distance. And really, it's like the antithesis of the Verbinski school of like, everything is character, and everything is characters who are transmitting narrative through their character actions.
Yeah.
That's just not how.
Which is why when you see two people sword fight on the top of a CGI ship in a CGI whirlpool, you actually care about the results of that battle, because you're so clued into exactly who the characters are and know them on a personal level. And that's just not the case here.
Yeah, it's when the chameleon points his gun at the rattlesnake and says, "Try me."
I mean, I guess the thing is, there are exceptions to that, and I want to poke at them, because, like, I'm thinking of Thelma and Louise, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Matchstick Men. I'm thinking of The Martian is a really good example of this, where, I think there is his definite Robot Ridley stuff is on display, but these are immensely personal character study type films that are just about people, that are and you do truly care about the people by the end of it. But now that I'm saying this, even Thelma and Louise, a movie that I loved, and I think we're going to rank pretty freaking high here in a minute when we do that, is kind of, it's a movie made by a man studying two women trying to make their way in a world controlled by men, and they ultimately can't. And reject it and drive away from it off that cliff, and that beautiful, wonderful ending. And even that is like you feel deeply for these women. You absolutely do. But it's still just a little bit removed because it's not made by a woman. This is not a story about women by women. And so it's like he's empathizing with them. He's empathizing with the plight of women in this world, but he can't entirely because he's not there, and that's not a lived experience. And so the result, I think, is a movie that like you care deeply about them and you're sad, certainly, but you're also just, I think it works in that movie because you're like, wow, this sucks. I've never I don't know. I'm having trouble describing what I mean, but
no, it's really hard. It's the kind of thing where it would actually almost require like a video essay where we took specific shots to explain, and then maybe like take other similar moments from other films that land differently, and then say, why does it land differently? Probably because of how it's being shot. Like I think a lot of his best movies, okay, well, uniformly, actually, I will say Ridley Scott's best movies are ones where the script is just really solid and it's a really good story, and he has really good performers who are able to convey the drama and the narrative and what the characters are thinking and feeling through their performances, while he is simultaneously he's using all of his strengths, which are different strengths, to tell the story. So he's like, I think Gladiator is a great example where it's almost like he's over here telling this grand operatic, distant tale of Rome, and then Russell Crowe is this incredibly charismatic and compelling actor walking through the middle of his shots, drawing your attention to the story that's happening. I'm being a little silly there because obviously, like it's a collaboration, but like the point I'm trying to make is it doesn't really work without that super charismatic actor with the really emotive face like your Matt Damon or your Russell Crowe to anchor it, and almost demand that you pay attention to the character in this moment. I mean, I think the funny thing about The Martian is like Ridley literally has to have the camera crammed into a small space with Matt Damon because you're physically either in the hab or in like a car, and it actually keeps him from doing a lot of this. But then you have these whole scenes where he's like showing these vistas of Mars, right? He kind of can't help himself.
Yeah, man, you're making me realize that like every movie that we love that's a Ridley movie is almost kind of, turning into the skid of his natural tendencies. Like Alien is such a good example. That movie feels cold and isolating. That's Ridley Scott.
Yeah.
But also that's the movie. That's why the movie works.
Right.
Thelma and Louise, less cold and isolating, but like there is this overall theme of this movie that you can't understand what we are going through. And so you're watching us struggle through this, and ultimately they're running away from the world. They're running away from this world of men, but they're also running away from us, right? They're driving away from us. It's the end of the movie is them fleeing from the camera, fleeing from us, jumping off a cliff. And so there's a little isolation there. It's like, you couldn't be part of this world. We're gone. Going down the list a little bit here. The Martian is a little bit cold and isolating because it's a single man stuck on a planet,
Yeah.
Blade Runner is cold and isolating because like that's the vision of the future that's being created in this thing. The deep irony of them hunting robots while also being a world of kind of like coldness and like non-humanity.
Yeah, it's kind of his thing. I mean, it's interesting because you say a name like David Fincher. David Fincher has a very particular type of movie that he likes to do, and it's interesting because Ridley Scott does a lot of different types of movies, but the best ones are this particular type. I agree, or at least when the story matches the style is what you were saying, right? Because the problem is when you do a movie like Kingdom of Heaven, which I do think is a good movie, but it's a Kingdom of Heaven narratively is basically a heroic tale of a knight,
Mhm.
which shouldn't really be told with the amount of like irony and distance that Ridley brings to it.
It shouldn't. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like all I almost want to say all of his movies are visually spectacular, even the ones that I don't like. But it's he just doesn't. This reminds me of a question I feel like we might have asked previously, although I don't remember if we actually said this. But it was something like, does he think these are all great? Like does he stand back from Prometheus and think like people just don't appreciate Prometheus? I'm totally happy with how that turned out.
Mhm.
Or does he feel like it missed the mark?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like Prometheus is another great example where it's like he made the movie with the same exact sort of filmmaking mentality that he used for Alien, but the story is totally different. So it
Yeah.
just totally doesn't connect. It doesn't gel.
Yeah, because it's actually supposed to be an incredibly personal story about a woman struggling with her faith in light of finding her creator, and it
Mhm.
just can't actually be that.
Yeah.
Because I just don't think he knows how to tell a story like that.
Yeah. Well, once again, he doesn't write these stories, and maybe he's just not like interested in that side of things. Maybe he's just like, you give me your script. If I like it, then I'm going to make a really visually amazing film. And I just don't particularly care if the story kind of falls apart because that's not my thing. I'm the director.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I do. I think we've gotten to the bottom of it. And I think this sums up my frustration so much because so many of these ideas are good. So many of these movies are really, I want them to be good, right? I don't ever enter a Ridley Scott movie being like, I'm ready to fucking hate this thing. But it is just, he has this very unique lens. And I think it's, it's really interesting. You look over this list and the cool thing in a world we live in right now, how many sequels, Matt? He's made 27 movies. How many sequels has he made?
I mean,
2.
he's made a prequel. He's made a
Yeah.
what's the other one other than Prometheus?
Alien Covenant.
Oh,
Technically,
gotcha. Yeah.
I mean, Alien Covenant, I guess, is the only true sequel because
Yeah.
Prometheus is technically a prequel if we get
Right.
down to it. But yeah, he's not interested in really returning to the worlds that he makes very often. He's always searching new challenges and new things. He's always searching for new types of movies to do. I think he follow like we like kind of divided it into broad categories, but even so, like All the Money in the World and House of Gucci, very relatable in kind of content and story, but also very different types of movies. And so he's kind of continually searching out new things and new challenges, and I think that's really commendable, and I wish more people working in Hollywood were like Ridley Scott. But yeah, it is often frustrating too because you just look at this and it's like, I want to like this, and I want it to make me feel something. I want to watch this movie and I want it to make me feel something, and I am left so often cold. And in a lot of movies that really works in its favor because that's what the movie wants you to do. But
Yeah.
like The Counselor, man, I can't get over how good The Counselor is, man.
Yeah.
It's such a bad movie that I love so much.
Yeah.
It left me feeling so cold, and that was the point.
Yeah. Or The Last Duel is one where
Yeah.
it's meant to leave you with this feeling of like, Christ, what was this all for?
Yeah.
Like you're I mean, I guess, he won, but like sort of, so what? It's like it's which is exactly the feeling you're meant to leave with, right? Like and that's just, I agree with you, right? Like I loved, we just talked about The Last Duel. I love that movie. I've if anything, like since I watched it, I've just been thinking about it more and more, thinking about how great it is. So it's not like I'm coming down on the side of like I think Ridley is incompetent and a terrible director or anything. It's just like there's this huge variance. And I think we do understand where it comes from now, which
I think
is nice.
I think you talked last week about how Jordan Peele is like a director and a writer that like writes for you specifically, which is, I mean, not obviously not literally true, but like the sensibility he has, the way he approaches storytelling and movie making is just something that perfectly aligns with exactly what you want out of storytelling and movie making. And I think the thing with Ridley Scott is that it is more than likely not the case, that like the way he approaches storytelling, the way he approaches movie making so often is so different from what I would like to see that it's rare that he has a movie that I absolutely love. But he is such a talented director that he can still, in that mode, craft movies that I fall absolutely in love with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that you said the word craft there, because it reminds me of just the idea of being a director as a sort of craftsman of the film.
Yeah.
And I think that just the way he sees that task is not necessarily the same way that someone like Jordan Peele does, or someone like Shyamalan does, or someone like Verbinski does. He sees himself as doing a slightly different thing than I think they see themselves as doing. And and the thing that he's doing really, really works a lot of the time. It's great.
It does.
Yeah.
Let's figure out which films it works the best in. I think we've dropped their names a few times, but let's go ahead and do our dirty work here and get all these films in a nice tier system.
Okay.
I think the first thing we want to do is just get the F tier in its place. Gonna go ahead and put Someone to Watch Over Me.
Yep.
Black Rain.
Sounds good.
1492.
White.
Well, I would call White Squall B tier.
I think White Squall can be B. How do I feel about
remember
Hannibal?
How we felt about Hannibal.
Yeah,
I'm gonna put Legend in there. I know it's gonna make you mad, but that's an F tier movie.
I'll let you have that one. Yeah, it's funny. I literally don't remember how I feel about Hannibal right now. It's a weird.
I didn't like it, but do you remember how we felt about Body of Lies? I feel like that's an F tier movie.
I think that can be an F tier.
I think Robin Hood is as well. Prometheus.
Yeah.
Definitely Exodus.
Yes.
Oh, yikes. All the Money in the World. I'm fine with that being F tier. Covenant.
Covenant's got a lot of stuff in there that I like, actually.
Okay.
It feels.
So I think that's all of our definite Fs.
Yeah.
So,
if you're gonna take Legend, I'm gonna pull Alien Covenant out of there.
Okay. White Squall, G.I. Jane, definitely some B tier stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We can go ahead and put Hannibal and Black Hawk Down in there.
Sounds good.
A
Good Year, probably B tier. Probably.
Yeah, Kingdom of Heaven, probably B tier, or were you gonna put that higher?
I would say Director's Cut would go higher.
Okay, let's leave it out for now. So A Good Year. I'm honestly struggling to remember some of these movies. American Gangster, The Counselor, definite B's.
Okay. All right.
Oh, were you going to try to argue The Counselor for higher? All right, hold on.
No.
No. I want this to happen. Let's do it.
Okay. I mean, The Counselor. No, I think I was just going to argue American Gangster should be higher, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think The Counselor is a brilliant masterpiece. Yeah.
Counselor, we're getting out of here, even though I love that movie to death, and would maybe put it in my top 5 if I was doing this by myself.
Well,
Covenant is B.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And it should feel lucky it's there.
Oh, why is House of Gucci not already gone from this list? Get that shit out of here.
I liked it more than All the Money in the World. But yeah, when looking at these B tier movies, I can't put it there.
Yeah, so. I think that's an F tier.
Yeah.
So should we? I think everything that's not in B or F is necessarily A.
Yeah.
So that leaves.
Maybe we should change F tier to just below B tier, because F tier sounds like it's trash, and that's not necessarily what I think.
All right.
So
well,
C tier.
C tier. All right. You want me to read over what we have so far?
Sure.
All right. So in C tier, we have Someone to Watch Over Me, Black Rain, 1492, Legend, Body of Lies, Robin Hood, Prometheus, Exodus, Gods and Kings, All the Money in the World, and House of Gucci.
Can we just stop for a second? Reading that list, I know I watched the movie Body of Lies. I have zero memory of that movie. I know it has Russell Crowe in it. Is that the Leo one?
That's the Leo one, yeah. Well, I had the same brain fart about all the money in the world, where for a second I was like, what the fuck is that? We just talked about it for 2 hours. Okay, so for B tier, we have White Squall, G.I. Jane, I guess, Hannibal.
What do you
Black
mean,
Hawk
I guess?
Down.
Would you want that to be lower or higher?
Probably lower, honestly, but
okay,
whatever. I don't care. Black Hawk Down, A Good Year, The Counselor, and Alien Covenant.
This feels good to me. This feels good.
Yeah.
Which means we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 A-tier movies.
Yeah.
Which out of 27, I mean that's pretty good, man.
That's a pretty good career to have 9 A-tier all-timers. So, which I'm just going to read those out and then we can sort them, I guess. Alien, obviously. Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, Gladiator, Matchstick Men, Kingdom of Heaven, director's cut, The Martian, American Gangster, and The Last Duel.
I'm okay with this. American Gangster sticks out to me, but I'll give it to you. I think Denzel is so fucking good in that movie that I'm totally fine with it. And Kingdom of Heaven kind of sticks out a bit for me too, because like I just think that's like super high B tier, but it can be low A tier. That's fine.
Sure, I don't even disagree. You know, I think the thing I'll say about American Gangster is that for me, it is the one sort of biopic, you know, true life events movie that he's done that I thought worked the way it was supposed to, and that was because of Russell Crowe and Denzel Washington.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
No, I you've won me over.
Okay.
So that's our tier list. Now let's go ahead and do our top 5. So we have to pick 5 of these 9 A-tier movies and rank them.
Okay, it's very hard to come up with your 5th favorite on a list, but
I know.
I mean,
let's try to make it easier on us.
Yeah.
I do not think Kingdom of Heaven would appear in the top 5.
Okay.
Do not think American Gangster would appear in the top 5.
Okay.
So that's 2 gone. We need 2 more gone.
Okay.
I'm gonna say Matchstick Men. I don't know how I feel about that. As I said,
yeah, that's not in my top 5. I don't think.
Okay.
So wait, we're trying to eliminate one more.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to say Blade Runner.
Yeah, I knew you would.
Which is wild to say out loud. I said it out loud and I laughed at myself as I said it, but I think it's the truth.
Yeah, so it's funny. I think maybe we might just disagree about this one. I think I would put probably The Last Duel actually at the bottom of my top 6. Therefore knocking it out of the top 5.
Okay. Convince me.
So I mean, for me, Blade Runner, it seems to me that you know, it's basically a matter of like Blade Runner versus The Last Duel. And for me, Blade Runner is like a genre defining classic film. It's like, even if you don't like it, you have to acknowledge its impact. And all of the weird stuff that movie is doing is the stuff where it plays to his strengths. The Last Duel is a great movie though. Like, that's the problem. It's definitely an amazing movie. I'm not saying it's not great. It's just like, I don't think I'm going to be thinking about The Last Duel in like 20 years, whereas I sort of have been thinking about Blade Runner for 20 years. And I admit part of it is probably recency bias. I literally just saw The Last Duel for the first time. So
we're going to get together in 2043 and to see what you think about The Last Duel.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. I will relent. I the only counter to that will be that I do think I'm honoring Blade Runner and its importance to cinema by putting it number 6 on Ridley Scott's.
Yeah, that's fine.
But no, that's fine. I think we can eliminate The Last Duel. From our top 5 at least. I just want to acknowledge that is a truly great movie that I was absolutely stunned by.
Yeah, me too. Huge recommend. Yeah. So
we're left with Alien, Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, Gladiator, and The Martian. That feels like a pretty solid top 5 list. Now we just got to figure out what order they go in.
I'll let you put Blade Runner at the bottom because you obviously want to do that.
I do. You are correct. Okay. So number 5, we've got Blade Runner. I think to me, next should be either Thelma and Louise or The Martian or Gladiator.
I was thinking the same.
Okay.
Not Gladiator. Gladiator is one of my
well,
favorite
I know
movies, yeah.
the Mad Effect is gonna inflate Gladiator a bit.
For sure. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because like Thelma and Louise is probably a better film, but I like The Martian better. So it's one of those impossible baby splitting choices.
Hmm.
I don't know.
I'm
Do you feel
gonna
strongly?
say Thelma and Louise number 4.
Okay.
I think
And The
that
Martian.
honors it enough without destroying my love for The Martian. So
Sounds
Thelma
good.
and Louise, then The Martian,
Yep.
and then so our top 2 is going to be Gladiator and Alien, making it clear that this is a list made by 2 men born in the mid 80s.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, I'm like, I mean, Gladiator was my favorite movie for probably 10 years, but Alien is Alien.
Yeah, the interesting place I'm at right now is I went into this project saying Alien is my favorite Ridley Scott movie, and then I spent a year watching every single Ridley Scott movie, and it's kind of remarkable that my opinion just hasn't changed at all. I found a lot of new movies that I really really love, and I learned to appreciate some movies I didn't like as much the first time a little bit more, but the fact remains that Alien, his first movie or second movie technically, we don't have the Duelists on this list, actually.
Oh,
I just realized that.
oh man. Where would the Duelists go? I don't know if it's one of his top 5 movies, but I think
it's
it is
definitely not
A-list.
one of his top 5. But the question is, does it go in A or B?
I think it's A.
I think you're right. I do. I think it was a really good movie.
Yeah.
Okay,
Duelists.
so that's boom. Slip that in at the very end. The Duelists, A tier.
Great.
Good job. I think it's got to be Alien number 1, man. I think it has to be.
Also, it just makes it funny because I feel like this is like the second or third time we've done this thing where we ultimately decide that the director's best film is their first film, or one of their first films.
That's true. I mean, that's like, going back to the Wachowskis, like I love Speed Racer and I love The Matrix, but Bound was such a joy for me that like that's always going to be nearer at the top.
Yeah, I agree.
And then of course The Sixth Sense. It is a really interesting phenomenon. I think we need to pay close attention to this as we move forward with new directors. That the number 1, because you think with anything like you get better as you go, right? And so your movies would improve, but it's usually the early works that are loved the most fondly.
Well, I think that there's something to that, because I think there's something raw and personal about the first thing that a creator puts out into the world.
Sure.
And it's really, really hard for an artist to not repeat themselves. I mean, I experience this, and I'm not even like a published creator. I just write things from time to time, and I find that I'm like, well, I kind of return to the same themes over and over. And a lot of my favorite authors return to the same ideas over and over. And like usually they articulated it really well with their first or second stab at that theme. And then if they're going to keep doing it, they either have to talk about something different that they're not as passionate about, or they have to find like new ways of talking about the same thing, which is going to become increasingly kind of strained. So I think that at least partially explains why the creator tends to kind of nail it early in their career and then either repeat themselves or drift off into less passionate work later.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there is like a finite amount of creative energy, right? Like with any resource, it's not infinite.
Yeah.
You pour a lot of that into the first few things you're making.
Yeah, and I think there's certain amount. I think that most creators are interested in certain ideas.
Yeah.
Like and they don't really move past them. They just kind of keep. You could observe that about Ridley Scott. He likes to tell stories about women who are in a shitty situation. That happens over and over. He likes to tell stories about men being idiots and self-destructive.
Yes.
And he likes to tell like man versus nature stories. There's a couple of them in there, I don't know. Anyway, I'm happy with our list though.
I am happy with our list. So Matt, what is our final top 5 in ascending order?
From 5 to 1, we have Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, The Martian, Gladiator, and number 1, Alien.
I wonder, as much As much as we learned so much over the course of this 27 episodes, Matt, I wonder if we had ranked Ridley Scott's top 5 at the beginning of this, how different that list would have looked. I think the only thing is Thelma and Louise might not have made it.
Because I hadn't seen it, for one
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I unfortunately think you're probably right, and part of, I mean, I think it's just worth admitting, right, that like a big part of our ranking is going to be just the like subjective assessment of having loved some of these movies for a long, long time.
Totally. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. So that is it. That is Sir Ridley Scott. We did it. We're done. We're never doing a director with that many movies again. I'm sorry, Steven Spielberg. You've got 35, 36 now, actually. That's just too many. Can't do it. I think going forward, the rule is going to be around 10 maximum. I've thought a lot about doing like Spielberg, but just saying, well, let's pick 10 of Spielberg's movies. And one, that becomes an impossible task when you look at the list of movies that you're having to pick from. And two, I think the thing I enjoy so much about this project is getting to watch the movies I've never seen before, the smaller movies that you would never look at a list of all their movies and pick to go in the top 10, Like if we were doing this with Ridley Scott, we would not have picked The Duelists. No way. We would not have done it. We would not have picked A Good Year, I don't think. And I thought that movie was delightful.
You're totally right. It's an excuse to watch things that I wouldn't watch anyway. And even the ones that I didn't like very much, I learned something from them.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, we kind of been joking over the last few months about how long we've been on this Ridley Scott thing and how ready we are for it to be done. And that is partially true, but I still had a really, really great time with this.
Yeah, I did too. I will like the only part of the thing that ever made me feel things other than joy was loading up a movie and seeing that it was 2 hours and 40 minutes long.
Every single one of these damn movies, man. Every single one.
And just being like, okay, like that's often not just my whole evening, but sometimes 2 whole evenings, because I have kids and my life doesn't allow me to just have an uninterrupted 3-hour chunk ever, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that. I get that for sure. We watched a 3-hour movie the other day, Damien Chazelle's newest movie called Babylon. It's 3 hours and 10 minutes, I think. It took us 3 nights to watch that movie.
And it probably does impede my enjoyment to have to break a movie apart. It probably impedes my like processing of it too, to be like, I gotta stop and then I'm gonna pick up later.
Yeah,
like that's not the ideal way to watch a movie, obviously.
No, for sure. All right, so we have not decided which director we're doing yet. Next, we will probably have a whole segment on the second half of one of our future shows where we kind of come to that decision together. We might not even do a director. We might take a little bit of break from our director series and do some other kind of short series exploring something or other. We haven't decided, but that is coming up in the future. We're going to keep doing this for sure at some point as well.
Yeah, sounds good.
But that is going to be it. Oh, before we go, we should do the results of last week's canon. I forgot about that.
Oh, okay.
We had a vote last week, Matt, about Nope.
What did they say?
Well, I wish it would be a great joke if I could say Nope. But the answer is yup.
They said
with
yup.
83% of the vote, our listeners said yes, absolutely, Nope belongs in our list of great films. Welcome, Jordan Peele's first film. I have a sneaking suspicion it will not be his last. We did get a couple comments on the vote, Matt, that I wanted to read some of them to you because I thought they were pretty good. Okay. One user, David, says, "This is the most doof movie I've ever seen. It has sci-fi elements, family as a plot point, is delightfully weird, and talks incessantly about film. Jordan Peele must be a subscriber."
That makes me happy.
Samantha says Jordan Peele is a master of storytelling. They always appreciate the subtext in his film. He's smart and he expects his audience to be smart versus shoving everything right in your face. A deeply layered movie. I agree, Samantha. That's a great point.
Well said.
Yeah. And Jody Jane says that they agreed that the rewatch really is crucial to the understanding and enjoyment of this movie.
Well, I need to do that then.
Yes, you do. Get on it right now.
Okay.
Actually, go watch the M. Night Shyamalan movie first, because we got to talk about that too.
Okay.
Speaking of which, we don't know what we're doing next week. This is the first time in 27 plus weeks that we haven't had a clear plan for what comes next. And so we're going to kind of play it by ear a little bit. I think we have a few movies we've been wanting to talk about that we haven't gotten the chance to. I think Matt saw a movie last week that I've been wanting to talk to him about for, 5 years, Matt? 4 years?
That
something
can't
around
be,
there?
That can't be true.
It is. We'll figure it out, but next week will be a new episode at which we talk about something.
Yeah, something.
But that's all we had for you folks this week. If you have any opinions on Ridley Scott's House of Gucci or Ridley Scott in general, or if you want to share your top 5 Ridley Scott films, please do so. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on Twitter at doofmedia. You can always find us on Reddit at r/doofmedia, where there will be a thread for this episode in which you can drop those top 5 Ridley Scott films. I want to read them. I like seeing what other people think, and I'm wondering how different from ours they would be, because I think we went with, in a lot of cases, probably some of the most popular picks. So I wonder if there's some people out there that have a little bit different taste than us that would put Alien Covenant as number 1, for example.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear about that. And if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms
In the world.
Mm-hmm.
That was a Ridley Scott reference.
Oh,
all the money in the world.
Oh, I get it. Okay. Yeah.
It's really subtle. I'm kind of like the Jordan Peele of podcasting. So
yeah, it was layered. I found. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head over to patreon.com/Doof Media and donate at any of the available levels. We have a new bonus episode coming out next week of our other levels of the Tower series. It's going to be on The Lawnmower Man, a Stephen King adaptation. And I did put that in quotes.
Yes. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcast. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks. Next week, as we said, we don't quite know what it's going to be yet, but we'll be back and we'll do something cool. And maybe next week is when I'll have my my Mandalorian rant, Matt, because the first episode of Mandalorian came out yesterday, and I got to get on my soapbox because I'm very upset.
I will look forward to that.
All right. Look for that next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.